Hello, I'm Trish Safner. I'm in the Thompsonville Community Garden, and this afternoon we are going to be talking about good bug, bad bugs. It's an essential part of our life on planet Earth, and it's important that we get along with them and learn how important they are to our lives every day. So I wanted to share a few fun facts to kind of get you over the fear of working with insects while you're working in your garden. 95% of all animal species are insects, and they play a major role in every aspect of life on Earth. 10% of insects are what gardeners would call harmful, but the rest are called beneficial, and their many important functions are crucial. They're pollinators, they're decomposers, and they're food for predators. So why is it that we are bothered by this 10%? 9 billion organisms are living in 1 teaspoon of garden soil, and they help your plant access the nutrients, fight off pests and diseases. I'm not sure who counted this teaspoon, but I'm glad I didn't have to do it. In the plant world, there is constant activity of buildup and breakdown of nutrients in the soil that is happening all the time. And this is very similar to the process in our bodies, the breaking down and the building up of nutrients, and that gives us nutrients that we feed off of every day. The same thing is true in the plant world. So wouldn't it be important if we eat plants and feed ourselves, and we make sure that all the nutrients coming into our bodies are healthy? That's what organic gardening is all about. When plants are attacked by pests, they send off a signal that helps bring in beneficial insects that actually help them. So you don't always have to break out the Roundup if you see a pest. Sometimes when we see an insect, it's a pest, and sometimes it's a beneficial insect. And the best way to know is to do your research. There are some great books that are available. The one that I refer to is called Good Bug, Bad Bug. It's a great, handy, small book that you can bring right into the garden. It shows the pest. It shows the pest in a young stage. So when you're in the garden looking at your leaves, you're able to have a reference of whether this is a good bug or a bad bug. If it is a bad bug, what do you do about it? Well, the handiest thing is just to carry a jar of hot soapy water with you. And when you see a bad bug, stick it in the jar. It's the easiest and the healthiest way to take care of your plants. And speaking of pests, what really is a pest? It really is in the eye of the beholder. A pest is something that competes or interferes with human activity. It can be injurious to humans or animals, or it could spread disease. So after we've identified the pest, we need to decide what is an acceptable means of taking care of the problem or preventing further problem. In the organic world, we call this IPM, Integrated Pest Management, and it's a series of cultures that take place starting from research. When we've talked previous weeks on how to plan your garden, what you need to do is think about the plants that you want to grow because you like to eat them, and you need to research what type of pests are around that plant during the growing season. And there are a few ways of getting around the pests. One example is to plant your vegetable when the life cycle of the pest has already started. A great example of that is potatoes. The Colorado potato beetle is a big problem in the garden world, and by planting your potatoes later in June, you've actually outwit the potato beetle in the cycle of the potato beetle, and then you don't have as many problems. Another way is to make sure that your soil is healthy. The way to do that is to do that soil test early in the season, amend the soil, correct the pH if it needs to be done, add some rock amendments like lime if it needs to be made more basic. And adding organic matter, of course, is always a great way to add more fertility to the soil. The reason why that's important is if you have healthy soil, you have healthy plants, and if you have healthy plants, they're not as attractive to pests. Believe it or not, the pests are like bullies, and they're attracted to weak plants. So if you're putting plants in the ground and they're not in good shape, they've got a lot of yellow leaves on them, they might be really leggy, they might be old plants, they might not have been well taken care of in the nursery, and you put them in soil that's not very healthy, it's just a welcome signal for the pest to come in and take that plant over. So again, it goes back to planning your garden, making sure that your soil is healthy. putting the plants in at the right time, and making sure that the soil is healthy with the amendments and the pH. Another means of protecting the soil would be to interplant, plant flowers, planting herbs to add diversity. The diversity is important because it brings in beneficial insects that want to feed on those plants. So you're feeding the insects that will someday maybe eat the pests by providing a variety of nectar, and the nectar would be in the form of different size flower heads or different herbs. The herbs are also very helpful with the pests because they create a strong scent. Something like rosemary or sage or oregano creates a very strong scent that confuses the pest that's coming in looking for your tomatoes and squash. So by having those nearby your vegetables, it confuses the pests and sends it off somewhere else. Crop rotation is very crucial to keeping the soil healthy. If you're planting the same type crop in the same area year after year, number one, you're depleting the soil of the same nutrients. You're weakening the plants as you put them in there because they don't have enough nutrients to bring them into health throughout the season. And so it's an automatic assumption that you're going to have pests on that same plant. We see that often in monocultures and farming with corn and squash. There's a big problem with pests in those plants because they keep planting it in the same place. In your own garden, you have that ability to write down what you planted year to year and keep track of it. So the following season, you put in different plants and you're adding diversity with herbs and flowers. Row covers are also a great way of preventing pests. Early in the season, when you're putting in Asian greens or you're putting in brassicas such as broccoli, cauliflower, or the squash plants, you can put down row covers, which are a fabric weave, a very thin spun fabric. It allows the rain and the sun to come in, but it keeps the pests out. So by putting in your new plants and covering them with row cover, you don't allow that pest cycle to even start in your garden. So row covers, companion planting, the diversity, making sure that your soil is healthy are all great ways to protect the soil, keep a healthy plant, and keep the pests away. Another way that you can check on pests through the season is to look at the plants on a regular basis. I've talked about this before. Observation is key to seeing how your plants are adapting to the environment that they're in. Are they looking stressed? Are we having bad weather? Are we having a week of clouds and no sun and lots of rain? This is going to stress out plants because they're not able to photosynthesize without the sun. And it's also going to bring in a lot of damp air sitting on leaves like squash plants that are very large. It doesn't allow the water to evaporate off the surface, and it can easily bring in plant diseases and pests. So keeping an eye on the weather and monitoring temperatures. If we seem to be in really hot temperatures early in the season, it actually will bring in a new cycle of insects, and they'll come in and attack your plant earlier than they would have probably in the previous years. So keeping a journal is probably the most important part of gardening. It helps you decide what went right and what went wrong, gives you all the information to plan for next year. And you can take that information and share it with others and help others learn how to grow. So all these things are important in the garden. Identifying what a pest is very helpful. So again, I encourage you to get a good book, something that you can bring to the garden. Looking on the internet is great, but when you're in the garden and you're right there and you're seeing this insect, you don't know what to do, a great book with pictures and explanations to bring to the garden is very important. Okay, so in closing our good bug, bad bug talk today, I wanted to just go over a few key points and takeaways that will help you in your garden experience. Number one is remember to plan the garden early in the season so that you know what kind of plants you like to eat, what kind of bugs might be a pest, so that you can be ready for them and hopefully outsmart them, but in the very least be able to identify them. So this is the book that I was referring to. It's called Good Bug, Bad Bug. The nice thing about this, it's very portable, it's actually washable. You can take it to the garden, you can refer to the pictures, you can learn about the bug while you're in its habitat, and hopefully outwit it. So the takeaways for how to prevent bugs that are pests in the garden is to do your garden cleanup. When you're seeing yellow or diseased leaves, it's important to remove it. If they're diseased, not to put it in the compost pile, but to put it in the trash. At the end of the season, it's just as important to remove all the garden debris so that it doesn't overwinter, because all that overwintering debris is food for the pests over the winter, so they're nice and ready for your plants when they're put in the ground in the spring. The other thing that helps is row covers and crop rotation and companion planting. The diversity is key to bringing in those beneficial insects. So bring out the herbs, bring in the flowers, bring in food for the pollinators. And lastly, determine what your tolerance level is. Do you really care whether your fruit or your food has a blemish on it, or are you more concerned with eating healthy food and keeping the soil organic? So I hope these tips have helped you. I hope you do some research and look into getting a great book as a resource. It will serve you for years to come. So we'll see you in the garden.